Bradford Bulls are a professional rugby league club in Bradford, West Yorkshire, England who play in the Kingstone Press Championship. They have won the Challenge Cup 5 times, been league champions 6 times and World Club Challenge winners 3 times. Bradford has played home games at Odsal Stadium since 1934. The team jersey is white with red, amber and black chevron. Bradford formed in 1907 as Bradford Northern from a split with Bradford FC, a founder of the Rugby Football League, which switched to playing the association football. Bradford Northern were later renamed Bradford Bulls in 1996 at the start of Super League. Bradford's main historical rivalry is with Leeds. They also have rivalries with Huddersfield and Halifax. The club entered administration in 2012 and again in 2014. For the first time in 41 years, the club participated in the second-tier championship in 2015 following the game's restructure, finishing second behind Leigh Centurions. History: 1863 to 1907, Bradford FC. The original Bradford Football Club was formed in 1863 and played rugby football, subsequently joining the Rugby Football Union. Initially the club played at Horton Cricket Ground, All Saints Road, but were asked to leave because of damage to the pitch. They then moved to Laisteridge Lane and later North Park Road in Manningham. A nomadic existence continued as they then went on to Peel Park, then Girlington and Apperley Bridge. Bradford Football Club and Bradford Cricket Club bought Park Avenue in 1879 and this resulted in the club becoming Bradford Cricket, Athletic and Football Club. The club's headquarters were at the Talbot Darley Street, and later the Alexandra, Great Horton Road. The club achieved its first major success by winning the Yorkshire Cup in 1884. In 1895, along with crosstown neighbours Manningham FC, Bradford was among 22 clubs to secede from the Rugby Football Union after the historic meeting at the George Hotel in Huddersfield in response to a dispute over broken time payments to players who were thus part-time professionals. These 22 clubs formed the Northern Rugby Football Union and Rugby League football was born. Bradford enjoyed some success in the new competition. In the 1903-04 Northern Rugby Football Union season, the team finished level on points with Salford at the top of the league and then won the resulting play-off 5-0. In 1905-06, Bradford beat Salford 5-0 to win the Challenge Cup and were runners-up in the championship. In 1906-07, Bradford won the Yorkshire Cup 8-5 against Hull Kingston Rovers. During this time Manningham FC had run into financial difficulties and, despite a summer archery contest that generated enough money to ensure the survival, its members were persuaded to swap codes and play association football instead. Manningham was invited to join the Football League in 1903 in an attempt to promote football in a rugby-dominated region, and the newly renamed Bradford City FC was voted into full membership of the second division without having played a game of football, having a complete team or even being able to guarantee a ground. The creation of Bradford City led to demands for association football at Park Avenue too. The ground had already hosted some football matches including one in the 1880s between Blackburn Rovers and Blackburn Olympic FC. In 1895, a Bradford side had beaten a team from Moss Side, Manchester, by 4-1 in front of 3,000 spectators. Following the change at Bradford City, a meeting was called of the Bradford FC members on the 15th of April 1907 to decide the rugby club's future. An initial vote appeared to favour continuing in rugby league, but then opinion shifted towards rugby union and the chairman, Mr. Briggs, used his influence to sway following the committee behind the proposed move to association football. This act, sometimes referred to as the Great Betrayal, led to Bradford FC becoming the Bradford Park Avenue Association Football Club. The minority faction decided to split and form a new club to continue playing in the Northern Union, appropriately called Bradford Northern, which applied for and was granted Bradford FC's place in the 1907-08 Northern Rugby Football Union season. Bradford Northern's first home ground was the Greenfield Athletic Ground in Dudley Hill, to the south of the city. They based themselves at the Greenfield Hotel. 1907 to 1963, Bradford Northern. Northern moved to Birch Lane in 1908. Bradford Council offered the club a site for a new stadium between Ruley Lane and Mayo Avenue in 1927. However, the NRFU said the site was too small and the club kept on looking. Before moving to Odsal, Bradford Northern had had two other homes at Greenfield Athletic Ground in Dudley Hill and at Birch Lane, which was part of the Bowling Old Lane cricket ground, although at times they also had to High Valley Parade as the capacity at Birch Lane was insufficient for large matches. On the 20th of June 1933, Bradford Northern signed a 10-year lease with Bradford Council for a former quarry being used as a waste dump at Odsal Top. It was turned into the biggest stadium outside Wembley. The Bradford Northern team played its first match there on the 1st of September 1934. Success came to Bradford in the 1940s with a number of cup wins. The Yorkshire Cup in 1940-41, 1942-43, 1944-45, 1945-46, 1948-49 and 1949-50, and the Challenge Cup 1943-44, 1946-47 and 1948-49. In the championship, Bradford found it difficult to win either before the war or after, despite being runners-up in 1942-43 and 1947-48. On Saturday, 3 November 1945, Bradford Northern met Wakefield Trinity in the final of the Yorkshire Cup held at Thrum Hall, Halifax. Wakefield began the match as favourites. They had lost only one of 13 matches thus far in the season. However, Bradford won 5-2 and lifted the Yorkshire Cup for the fourth time in 6 seasons. Bradford defeated Leeds 8-4 to win the Challenge Cup final at Wembley in 1947. The 1947-48 Challenge Cup final was notable as it was the first rugby league match to be attended by the reigning monarch, King George VI, who presented the trophy. It was also the first televised rugby league match as it was broadcast to the Midlands. Unfortunately, Bradford lost 8-3 to Wigan, and Frank Whitcomb became the first player to win the Lance Dodd Trophy on the losing side. The 1949 Challenge Cup final was sold out for first time as 95,050 spectators saw Bradford beat Halifax. In 1951-52, Bradford were runners-up in the league but beat New Zealand at Odsal in the first floodlit football match of any code in the north of England. In 1953, a crowd of 69,429 watched Bradford play Huddersfield in the Challenge Cup's third round. This was Bradford's highest ever attendance. They also won the Yorkshire Cup final 7-2 against Hull. Bradford and Leigh were the first rugby league clubs to stage matches on a Sunday in December 1954. Although there was opposition from the Sunday Observance lobby, Bradford's support declined rapidly in the 1963 season, attracting a record low crowd of 324 against Barrow. The club went out of business on 10 December 1963, having played just 13 matches, winning 1 and losing 12, scoring 109 points and conceding 284. 1964 to 1995. Third club. A meeting on 14 April 1964 saw 1,500 people turn out to discuss the formation of a new club, and those present promised £1,000 to help get plans for the new organisation underway. Amongst those who led proceedings were former players Joe Phillips and Trevor Foster. On 20 July 1964, Bradford Northern Limited came into existence. The club's new side had been built for around £15,000 and had Jack Wilkinson as coach. On the 22nd of August 1964, Hull Kingston Rovers provided the opposition in the reformed club's first match, and 14,500 spectators turned out to show the support, as Odsal hosted its first 10,000-plus gate for a Bradford Northern match since 1957. The reformed club won its first cup in 1965-66 by beating Hunslet 17-8 in the final of the Yorkshire Cup. In 1972-73, Bradford lost the Challenge Cup final against Featherstone Rovers 33-14. In 1973-74, Bradford won the Second Division Championship and were promoted back to the First Division. During this season, Keith Mumby made his debut, becoming the Bradford's youngest player at only 16 years of age, kicking 12 goals and scoring a try in the match against Doncaster. He went on to make a record 576 appearances for the club. In 1974-75, Bradford won the Regal Trophy 3-2 against Widnes. Peter Fox joined Bradford as coach for the first time in 1977-78. Bradford won the Premiership final 17-8 against Widnes and were also Championship runners-up. In 1978-79, Bradford appeared in another Premiership final, this time losing 24-2 to Leeds. A year later, Bradford won the Championship and Regal Trophy, Peter Fox winning the award for Coach of the Year. In 1980-81, the club made it back-to-back championships. In 1981-82, Bradford lost the Yorkshire Cup final 10-5 against Castleford and lost again in 1982-83, this time 18-7 against Hull. Keith Mumby won the award for First Division Player of the Year, while Brian Noble won the Young Player Award. In 1985, Ellery Hanley left Northern to join Wigan for a then-record transfer deal, worth £80,000 and a player exchange involving Steve Donlan and Phil Ford. By November 1987, Bradford had cash flow problems and the local council refused to help financially, but appointed a special committee to administer the club's finances. In December 1987, desperate for cash, Bradford transfer listed 22 players for a total of £210,000 plus Phil Ford for £120,000. In 1987-88, Bradford won the Yorkshire Cup final replay against Castleford 11-2 after drawing 12-12. Ron Woolley coached Bradford Northern for a short stint in 1989-90 and led them to the Premiership final and success in the Yorkshire Cup final when they beat Featherstone Rovers 20-14. David Hobbs became coach at Northern in 1990 until he left for Wakefield Trinity in 1994. Bradford lost the Regal Trophy against Warrington 12-2 in 1990-91. Peter Fox returned to Bradford for a second spell as coach in 1991, and in 1993-94, Bradford finished as runners-up behind Wigan on points difference. Fox left the club in 1995. 1996-2011, Golden Era. In 1996, the first tier of English Rugby League clubs played the inaugural Super League season and changed from a winter to a summer season. Bradford dropped the Northern monarchy to become Bradford Bulls. Matthew Elliott took over as head coach in 1996. The Bulls won the Super League title in his first season. Elliott coached the Bradford Bulls to the 1999 Super League head final, which was lost to St Helens. Brian Noble was appointed Bradford head coach in November 2000. Noble took the Bradford Bulls to the 2001 Super League Grand Final, in which they defeated the Wigan Warriors. As Super League vice-champions, the Bulls played against 2001 NRL premiers, the Newcastle Knights, in the 2002 World Club Challenge. Noble oversaw Bradford's victory. He took the Bulls to the 2002 Super League head final, which was lost to St Helens RFC. On the 20th of April 2006, Steve McNamara was promoted to head coach of Bradford following Brian Noble's departure to Wigan. At the time, he was the youngest coach in Britain. In his first season in charge, he guided Bradford to the Super League playoffs before the club were knocked out in the grand final eliminator by Hull. Following an 8th consecutive defeat, the Bulls' worst run in Super League, McNamara's contract was mutually terminated on the 13th of July 2010. Lee St Hilaire was coach for the rest of the 2010 season. Mick Potter became coach in 2011, despite the club being placed in receivership in 2012. The team was on the verge of making the semi-finals of Super League as Potter remained as unpaid coach. 2012-2014, financial difficulties and relegation. In March 2012, the club announced that it was in financial difficulties and needed £1 million to keep the club afloat. A public appeal saw a lot of new funds pour in from supporters, but following the issue of a winding up petition from HMRC for unpaid taxes, the holding company for the club was forced to go into administration. On the 26th of June 2012, the Rugby Football League announced that had the company been wound up, then the team would be allowed to complete the fixtures for the 2012 Super League season under the possible ownership of a supporters' trust. On the 2nd of July 2012, the club's administrator, Brendan Guilfoyle, made 16 members of staff, including the coach Mick Potter and chief executive Ryan Duckett, redundant, but announced that the club would attempt to fulfill its fixtures. Mick Potter continued as an unpaid coach until the end of the season. On the 31st of August 2012, a bid for the club from a local consortium, headed by Bradford businessman Omar Khan, was accepted by the administrator and was ratified by the RFL in early September. Days later, the RFL also granted the new owners a one-year probationary license enabling the club to compete in Super League 18 in 2013. Francis Cummins was appointed as head coach of the Bulls in September 2012. In late December 2013, it was announced that Chairman Mark Moore and directors Ian Watt and Andrew Calvert had resigned. In 2014, relegation was reintroduced to the Super League, with two teams being relegated. Bradford were deducted 6 points for entering administration early on in the season, and the Bulls were relegated from the top division of Rugby League in Britain for the first time in 40 years. Francis Cummins was sacked around the time of relegation and replaced by James Lowson won most of the remaining games. 2015 present. Championship. Bradford began the first championship campaign in 40 years against Leigh away, where they narrowly lost the game. By the end of the regular season they entered the Super 8s, finishing second. In the qualifiers, Bradford failed to make the top 3 for automatic entry to Super League for 2016, finishing 5th, which meant a trip to Wakefield to play them in the first ever £1 million game. Bradford would lose 24-16, condemning them to a second year in the championship. In preparation for the 2016 season, Bradford completed the signings of several experienced players, such as centre Chris Wellham from Super League side Hull Kingstone Rovers, as well as Oscar Thomas, Mitch Clark, Johnny Campbell, Jonathan Walker and Kurt Haggerty from London Broncos, Doncaster, Batley and Leigh respectively. The side had been made early favourites to once more reach the end-of-season Super 8s. Bradford started the season strongly, with a win over fellow promotion hopefuls Featherstone Rovers by 22-12. Omari Caro scored a hat-trick in this match. This was followed up by away wins at Whitehaven and Swinton. Finally, Bradford finished the regular 23-round championship season failing to make the top 4 following a 20-0 defeat at Featherstone Rovers on 24 July, who leapfrogged them into 4th place. This meant Bradford would miss out on a place in the qualifiers and would instead play for the Championship Shield, ultimately meaning they will spend a third consecutive season in the second division in 2017. Stadium. Odsal Stadium is situated in Bradford in West Yorkshire, England. The venue is used for rugby league and has been the home ground of Bradford Northern, Bradford Bulls since 1934. Odsal has also hosted many other sports, including association football, speedway, stock car racing, basketball featuring the Harlem Globetrotters, wrestling, show jumping and kabaddi. The stadium boasts one of the largest attendances of all time for any UK sports event when Halifax played Warrington on the 5th of May 1954 in the Challenge Cup final replay. For the 9th of November 2012, the Bulls sold the naming rights again to local business Provident Financial, meaning the stadium was named the Provident Stadium. Kit sponsors and manufacturers. 2016 squad. Future transfers. Gains losses. Technical staff. Coaching staff. Boardroom staff. Captains. From 1996 Robbie Paul 1996 to 2004. Jamie Peacock 2005. Easton Harris 2006. Paul Deacon 2007 to 2009. Andy Lynch 2010-2011. Heath Lestrange 2012-2013. Matt Diskin 2012 to 2014. Chev Walker 2015. Adrian Patel 2016. Coaching register. The head coach of the Bulls is James Lowes, appointed the 24th of June 2014. Honours. Leagues: RFL Championship, Super League, 1979 80, 1980 81, 1997, 2001, 2003, 2005. League Leaders Shield, 1999, 2001, 2003. Premiership, 1977-78. Yorkshire League, 1947-48. Domestic Cups: Challenge Cup 1943-44, 1946-47, 1948-49, 2000, 2003. League Cup 1974-75, 1979-80. Yorkshire Cup 1940-41, 1941-42, 1943-44, 1945-46, 1948-49, 1949-50, 1953-54, 1965-66, 1978-79, 1987-88, 1989-90. International Cup World Club Challenge